Have you ever wondered how to unlock the full cinematic potential of your Panasonic camera? Today we're going to dive deep into how you can get the most out of your videos by using V-LOG, a powerful profile that gives you a ton of extra control over how your footage turns out. So stick around as we use the LUMIX S5 to go over 4 main things. What is V-LOG? Why and when should we use V-LOG? How to properly expose V-LOG and some tools that you can use to do that, and then how to color grade V-LOG footage. So, secure the cup and let's get into it. Going with water today because I just had too much coffee already. First things first, a quick disclaimer for all my super technical, nerdy folks. My goal here is to give a practical overview of how to use V-LOG for those who don't know, so some of the explanations that I give may not be the whole story, or they may be simplified because I don't want anyone's head to explode. If you feel like you have more to add, leave a comment down below and please be kind and helpful to everyone down there. And a quick thank you to Panasonic for sponsoring this video as well. So let's kick things off with the big question. What is V-LOG? Log profiles like V-LOG are a way to retain more dynamic range in your image when you're shooting video. Dynamic range means the range between the brightest and darkest parts of your image. Even though the camera sensor on the S5 has the ability to capture 14 plus stops of dynamic range, we need somewhere to put all of that information. If we're shooting raw photos, we have the ability to capture the raw data from the sensor and hold on to it. But since most of us aren't shooting raw video, we don't necessarily have that ability. The typical dynamic range of an SDR, or standard dynamic range video file, is about 6 stops. So when we take those 14 stops of light from the sensor, some of them are going to get cut off either by clipping the white parts or the black parts, which result in blobs of either white or black with no detail left. This is a huge oversimplification since even in the standard profile, the camera is creating a specific look to decide what to do with all of that light from the input, but there are definitely more limitations to your dynamic range if you're shooting in that standard way. This is where V-LOG comes in. V-LOG is a mathematic and logarithmic equation that's applied to the input signal from the sensor. Basically, we can think of this as a tool that squishes all of that information so that it fits inside the dynamic range of a typical video file. So it brings up the dark parts so that they don't get clipped, and it brings down the bright parts so that they also don't get clipped. But here's the catch. Video shot in a log profile look super strange straight out of camera because the image has been squished in so much. And this doesn't just go for light either, but it also goes for the saturation of the colors too. So when you shoot in V-LOG, it'll look like there's very little contrast and very little saturation, and we're gonna have to stretch out the image again to get that back later. But we'll talk about that when we get to the color grading portion of this video. So naturally, the next question is, why would you want to shoot V-LOG and when is it appropriate? The very first thing that's super important to note here is that V-LOG requires color grading to get it looking normal. So if you don't want to color grade your footage and you just want to have a usable image straight out of camera, V-LOG is not for you. For example, if you're shooting an event and you need to do a same-day edit where you won't have time to color grade, you may want to take that step out of the process. Or if you're transferring straight over to your phone to post on social media, again, if you don't have time to color grade, V-LOG is not the way to go. I recommend taking a look at some of the other built-in profiles to try and find something that looks close to what you want your image to look like in the end. The reason that we would want to shoot in V-LOG is ultimately to have the most control over our image. If we shoot in a standard profile, we risk losing information in the brightest or darkest parts of our image before we even get our file to the computer. Whereas when we shoot in V-LOG, we retain all of that information and then we can decide what we want it to look like in the end. This makes shooting V-LOG especially useful in situations where you don't necessarily have control over the lighting, like for example, being outside where there's a giant fiery ball in the sky that is lighting the scene for you, or even if there's just a window in the shot. But even if you're in a studio situation like this one where you do have control over the lighting, it can still be useful for high contrast lighting, or even if you just want to keep a consistent workflow between all of your clips, between all of your projects. I basically shoot in log all the time because it fits my workflow and it gives me the most control over my image. And just so that it's said, while you do have more control over the information that's being retained contained in the image, it is still super important to have proper lighting and to try and make things look great to start with. Shooting vlog is not necessarily going to make it so that you can take a bad looking shot and fix it in post. So now that you know why and when to shoot vlog, let's talk about how to properly expose it and the tools that you can use to make sure you nail that exposure every time. First things first, we're going to need to turn on our vlog profile on the S5 IIX, which you can find in the video menu under photo style. It's going to default to the standard mode, but if you keep scrolling over, eventually you'll run into vlog. When you enable this, your image will change to be desaturated and flat like we talked about. But Panasonic has built in a way so that you can see your image in a more normal way while still recording in vlog. In the menu, we're going to find Vlog View Assist and then choose Vlog 709, which will make our monitor look like a normal Rec 709 image. And then we just make sure that it's enabled for the monitor, and if you're using an HDMI monitor, you can enable it for that too. Now our image looks normal again. And just to reiterate, you're still recording that low contrast, desaturated Vlog image, you're just viewing a corrected image to assist you in knowing how it will turn out. And the best part is that if you want, you could just move forward like this and expose based off what you see on the screen, and most of the time you'll be just fine. But there is a bit more that you should know to truly maximize your results in vlog. For example, it can be beneficial to slightly overexpose your image while using vlog. This is called exposing to the right, which basically means getting the image as close to clipping the highlights as possible without clipping the highlights. The reason that we want to do this is because the noise from the sensor is more pronounced in the dark parts of the image. So if we can overexpose a bit and then bring it back down later, we're pushing all of that noise into the black areas and we'll get an overall cleaner image. One way that we can expose to the right is by loading a pre-made LUT into the S5 IIX that corrects down by one stop compared to the other assist LUT that's built into the camera. If we find the option called LUT Library in the menu, we can load in custom LUTs. All I did was created a conversion LUT that converts from Vlog to Rec 709 exactly the same way as the one that's built in, but mine also takes the whole image down by one stop of light. This way, in order to get the image looking the same as it would have with the regular built-in LUT, I have to expose one stop higher to compensate. If you want that conversion LUT to add to your own camera, I'll leave a link for that down in the description so you can grab it for free. But there are even more tools that you can use built right into the S5 IIX for exposing properly. One of my favorites is using something called zebras. There are many ways to use zebras, but I like to do it so that it'll let me know when I'm too bright to the point of clipping. If we find the option for zebra pattern in the menu and then go to set, we've got two different levels that we can choose from here. So let's go to zebra 1 and we can choose any of the percentages that'll act as a low point. So for example, if we choose 70%, then anything over 70% brightness will show the zebra pattern. But what we're actually going to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says base/range. Under this, instead of anything over the selected level, it'll be a range above and below the selected level. And because we're in vlog, it shows it to us in stops of light, and then we can see the percentage below that if we want to. So we're going to crank this all the way up to 6.3 stops light above middle gray, which is our clipping point, and it says that that happens at 95%. I personally like to dial this back to about 6.2 stops and give myself a slight buffer before clipping. Then on the right side, we set our range, which I like to set to plus or minus 0.6 stops. This means that I'm going to see zebras anywhere from 89% brightness up to 99% brightness. And since the clipping of vlog is squished in a bit to 95% or so, this gives me a little bit of a buffer to guarantee that I'm keeping as much info in the highlights as possible. So when I'm exposing to the right, if I start to see those zebra patterns, I will dial it back a bit so that I know I'm not going too far. Then I make sure to customize my camera so that I have quick access to the zebra options in my Q menu, and then to turn on and off zebras using a custom button. This way I can set up my shot using the zebras to make sure that I'm not clipping, but then I can turn them off if I don't want to be looking at them anymore. Another tool that you can use for this is something called the waveform, which I also have attached to a custom button so that I can get to it quickly, but you can find it in the menu called WFM/vector scope. The waveform shows us a scale from the dark parts at the bottom to the bright parts at the top. And if you remember from zebras, we know that V-Log will clip at about 95% brightness. So we want to make sure that our signal doesn't go up above 95% of the way. Whereas if we were in a standard profile, clipping would be all the way at the top. So it's important for us to know that V-Log is slightly lower than this as a result of it being squished in. That being said, on the waveform, it's a little bit hard to tell exactly where that clipping point would be, but it becomes obvious when you start to see the waveform flattening out on the top. So as a test, we can crank up our ISO to purposely clip and we'll see it flatten out on top. And then all we need to do is keep everything under that area and you'll know that you're not clipping. Now, before I have you thinking that the only important thing to keep in mind is not clipping highlights, I want to make it abundantly clear that there is some give and take here. If your subject is dark and the background is super bright, it may actually make sense to clip the highlights in the background in order to get the subject up to a much more reasonable exposure. There's no magic formula here for when it's okay to clip or how dark is too dark for the important parts of the frame. It's just something that you'll have to practice with a lot, and it's going to change from every shot and every scene. So now we know how to expose our V-Log footage, so the final step is to color grade it so that it doesn't look like a flat gray blob. There are two main ways that you can correct V-Log footage in your color grading process to make it a normal looking image. The first is by using a correction LUT. Just like the LUT that's built into the camera, it applies a mathematical equation to convert V-Log footage into a viewable Rec. 709 output. The other way that you can correct V-Log to Rec. 709 is by using a color space transform tool like the one built into DaVinci Resolve. So we would choose our input color space and gamma as Panasonic V-Gamut and V-Log, and our output as Rec. 709 and Gamma 2.4, or if you're on a Mac, Rec. 709A. The way that I like to work is so that the LUT or the color space transform would be the last thing in my color grading chain, and then I do all of the other color grading that I want before that. This way, when you're doing the bulk of your grading, you're working with the most information possible, since all of that info is still squished into the middle of the range. For example, if I've exposed to the right in camera and I need to bring that exposure back down, I'll do that in a node or layer before the conversion to Rec. 709. And as far as all the creative things that you might want to do in the color grading process, you can technically do all of those before or after the LUT or color space transform, but it just depends on understanding what's happening in your chain. I definitely have plenty of other videos on my channel going way more in depth on how I color grade my videos, so if you want to check those out, please be my guest. But as always, I want to hear from you. Are you shooting V-Log, and is there anything that you do to help make the process easier for yourself? Leave a comment down below, and on your way down, hit that like and subscribe button. Huge thank you to Panasonic for partnering with me on this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.